Welcome to Train Signal. You're watching Video 7, Remote Access to Email. Now in the last video we took a look at Outlook Web Access, which gives you a great alternative or method to access your email remotely. However, Outlook Web Access does require a web connection for you to be connected to it and to view your email. In this video we're going to take a look at some alternatives to access your email remotely as well. Okay, remote access to email. We really have several choices, and we're going to cover the majority of these choices, the ones that are left over, in this video. We're going to take a look at POP3, and we're going to set POP3 up on the actual Exchange server itself. So you'll be hosting your own POP3 server. We're also going to look at IMAP4, kind of the new version of POP3. It's a different protocol altogether, but it kind of accomplishes the same thing in a more secure fashion. We're also going to look at the alternative of setting up a VPN server and client connection and then checking your Outlook email over that VPN connection. We're going to finish off with two other things. Offline mail, and this can be used anytime you're not connected to the internet or the network. You can actually access your email offline. Now, of course, you're not going to be downloading new email, but anything that you've already downloaded into your Outlook client is going to be available to you on your local machine. Okay, so in a sense what's happening is all of this email, public folder data, any of this information is cached locally on your local hard drive. And the last thing we'll look at is a new feature in Exchange 2003, and that's Outlook Mobile Access, which gives you the ability to use PDA devices, Pocket PCs, to connect to your Exchange server over the internet and access your email remotely as well. Let's get started with POP3. Okay, and what we're going to look at here, this diagram actually is going to be used throughout to represent what we're trying to do here. Here you see the Sophie's Toybox.local network with our servers on here, NAT1, Exchange1, and SMTP1. But now we've taken XP1 off of the actual network and we're in a remote network, as you see right here. Okay, so XP1 is literally connected to a different network in our test lab as well. So if you look at the IP address, it's on a 192.168.1 network. Basically in a different office across the internet from these three servers. We also will be looking at how a PDA can be used for that Outlook mobile access piece that we're going to cover last. Okay, POP3 specifically, when we're referring to POP3, first off, this is Post Office Protocol version 3, just so you know what it stands for. Real simple to set up on the server. We'll take a look at that next. Simple to set up in the client as well. It does require a POP3 email client. Okay, so once we have the server set up, to set it up on the client, that's what we're going to do within the POP3 email client. And I'm sure you've probably done this before with Outlook, Outlook Express, Mozilla's Thunderbird, or a whole slew of other POP3 email clients. Now, requires basic authentication, but this is unsecured authentication. Your authentication credentials are essentially supplied over the internet in clear text. Okay, so not the most security conscious protocol in the world. You can implement SSL and make this secure, so if you have concerns with security and passing authentication, username password across the internet, we can encrypt that. Okay, and it's recommended in a corporate environment that you do that. Okay, what happens with it? Mail is basically downloaded to the local machine, and then you're reading this mail offline. Okay, and then periodically, depending upon how you configure it, your email client connects back out over the internet to the mail server, downloads that email, and it's then stored offline on your local hard drive once again. So when you disconnect from the internet, anything that you've downloaded already, you have access to. You can compose email, you can delete email, you basically can do anything to all the email that you've downloaded, but until you connect back to the internet, you won't get any new email. Okay, in Exchange 2000, there's a default POP3 virtual server. This is installed. However, it is not started, and this is different. In Exchange 2000, it was started by default. For security purposes, though, this is disabled until you go in and actually enable it. A couple of other things here. Port 110 is the default port that is used for the Post Office Protocol version 3, so you need to be aware of that, port 110. And POP3 clients use SMTP to send email. So, when you're in Outlook, POP3 does half the job for you. You're going to download email using POP3. Well, SMTP is going to be used to actually send your email. So we're going to do some SMTP configuration here as well. Okay, let's get started. We're going to connect over to Exchange 1. And on Exchange 1, we're logging on as the domain administrator. And we're going to open up System Manager here. Within System Manager, we're going to go ahead and expand all the way down through our server, and we're open up this protocols folder here to display our different protocols that come with Exchange 2003. We're working with POP3 specifically here, and when you open this up, you see that it is disabled here with that red X. Now, if you right-click here and go to Start, typically what's going to happen, it's going to time out and it's not going to start, so you won't be able to actually get this to start here. And this is because this is just an instance of the POP3 protocol. And what actually is going on here, the master service for POP3 is disabled, okay, on this Exchange server. So that's the first thing that we have to do, is actually go out, take a look at our services, and enable that service. So I'm going to open up Services and Applications here, go down to Services, okay, and we're looking for the Microsoft Exchange POP3 service. Okay, you see right there. And if we come over here to the right, you see the startup type is disabled. So even if I right click here and try to start, I can't do anything with this at all. Okay, if I go to all tasks, there's nothing here that I can do. So what I need to do is go to properties. Here you see the startup type is set at disabled. We're going to change this to automatic. Going forward, we're going to be running POP3 on this machine, so we want to set this to automatic. Manual, we'll be able to start it right now, but the next time this machine reboots, the protocol will not be started. We'd have to go in and manually start the service up ourselves. So we choose automatic, click OK, and now when we right-click on this protocol, we can go ahead and click Start. Okay, real simple, doesn't take long at all to start, and now we can go back into the System Manager. Okay, if we refresh this screen, a lot of times this will start up. I'm going to close System Manager and see if it started up on its own here. Okay, no, we have to right-click this then here and start it ourselves. What sometimes happens is if you start here, you right-click, go to Start, and it's taking a long time to start, and then you go and start the service itself, you'll see it come back, and this POP3 virtual server will already be started for you. But regardless, you just need to right-click on it like I just did, click Start, and then you have the POP3 service up and running. Now, from time to time, you may run into problems with it where you need to stop and then restart it. Okay, stopping the service, however, will disconnect all connections. So if somebody's trying to access their POP3 email and they're in the middle of downloading stuff, you will cut them off. Pausing the service, however, will leave those connections that are already in place, will leave them connected. It will just refuse new connections. Okay, let's go down here to Properties then. And a lot of these settings are going to be very similar to what we saw on the SMTP virtual server. The IP address, you should assign this, give it an actual number here. So we're going to give it the IP address that we're using. You can limit the number of connections if you have performance issues. Connection timeout is at 10 minutes by default. If you want to basically disconnect people quicker so your connections will stay down, then you could set this to a lower time period as well. Access, here we have authentication. You see basic and simple authentication and security layer are selected by default. And basic authentication, basically what this is here, the password is sent in clear text like we were talking about before. The second alternative, however, simple authentication and security layer, what this is actually using is that default NT LAN manager authentication mechanism. So you can actually get some secure authentications, and what will happen when somebody logs on to their machine, let's say that Ray Moray is going to be traveling remotely and he's got his laptop. If he authenticates to his machine with a domain user account, so however he authenticates to the machine, that's actually going to be used and then supplied to the POP3 server that we're enabling here. Okay, so if somebody logs on and that account is valid on the POP3 server with an Active Directory, then we'll have encrypted authentication. If it's not, however, then we're going to use basic authentication, which is going to pull the authentication credentials right from the email client themselves, and that's when the passwords are sent across in clear text. Okay, so most likely you do not want to do this. You're going to get a lot of unhappy people who aren't able to authenticate. If you leave this selected, though, what this will do, it will give you some sort of protection anytime you have users who properly authenticate on their computers. Okay, let's go ahead and leave these selected, then we're going to cancel out of here because we changed nothing. You see, you do have the choice here to enable a SSL certificate if you want to put that in place. connection control. You can select which computers can access the virtual server. You may have a limited number of systems, so you could say only the list below. This would require you knowing the IP address or the domain name for these systems, something you typically will not be using. Message format, you have the choice of having it come across here, MIME. What this will do, multi-purpose internet mail extensions, this will give you the ability to set how you want these POP3 messages to be delivered. Okay, provide the message body as plain text, as HTML, or as both. So I can send a message to you, and maybe I put it in HTML format. If I set this here on my POP3 server as plain text, and you connect to the POP3 server and download my email, it's actually going to convert my HTML message into plain text for you. Okay, so you can do this if you want to control the, obviously a plain text message is going to be smaller than an HTML message. So if you want to control the message size and the downloading size, you can mess around with this. Selecting both will basically depend upon then the type of message that was sent, and this is the recommended setting here. Character set can be used if you have different character sets that are in place, different languages that are used in conducting or producing email here. So we're going to leave the default. And then our last option here, calendaring. When clients download meeting requests, they will contain a URL to the following Outlook Web Access server. Okay, so you can use a front-end server. We haven't really talked much about that at all. But by default, what it's going to do is just connect out to the default Outlook Web Access calendar. And that's okay. We'll leave that as it is. Okay, so there's really not much to configure. And we didn't really change anything at all here. So, when you're going through here, you can almost enable the POP3 service and do nothing else. Okay, if you need to create additional POP3 virtual servers, you can do that by right-clicking on POP3 and then going to New POP3 Virtual Server. Now, why would you want to create additional POP3 virtual servers? You may have different domains that you're servicing. You may want some fault tolerance. One of these POP3 virtual servers has to be taken offline for whatever reason. So maybe you split up your users. Half are using one POP3 virtual server and half are using a different POP3 virtual server. You can also put security on one, no security on the other one, things along those lines. For the most part, however, most companies are going to be fine using one POP3 virtual server, so it's not something that I would worry too much about at this point. If you do set an additional one up, keep in mind that it must be using a different IP address port number combination. Okay, this is listing right now on the IP address 192.168.200.100 port 110. So if you set up another POP3 virtual server, you're going to have to make sure that it's listing on a different port number or IP address. And you probably want to use the same port number, 110. That's the default, and that's what the email client's going to be using. So I would suggest that you use a different IP address if you do set up that additional virtual server. Okay, so that's all that there is here. Very, very simple, as I mentioned. Now we now need to go out to the NAT server. And basically what we're doing here, remember, people are going to be connecting from the internet into our POP3 server, and we don't have POP set up as one of our firewall exceptions. We're going to go back in here again to NAT basic firewall, go to WAN, services and ports. Now we just have to drag down here and find POP3. And by the way, if you're ever trying to add something that's not in this list, you can just click Add. Describe the service yourself, describe which interface it's going to listen on, TCP, UDP, port, private address, and outgoing port. So this information here can be filled in. You can create a custom service if need be. Okay, we're going to be using POP3. You see that it automatically defaults to TCP port 110, and we're going to point this inbound directly to the Exchange server. Okay, this is where it needs to go. We're not pointing it to the SMTP server because it's not actually sending email over the POP3 service. Okay, so we click OK. Click OK here again. And that's all that we have to do on the NAT server. Okay, let's take a look next at this SMTP service that we were talking about before. Now we've got it set up right now. When we go over and log on to XP1, we're going to be able to set up an Outlook POP3 email client, and we'll be able to download email, but at this point right now we can't send email. Okay, so to configure the ability to send email, we have to take a look at a couple settings. Okay, and this is going to involve going over to our Exchange server, as well as going over to the SMTP server. So let's start with the SMTP server. We'll find that, I guess at SMTP1 will be the easiest way to find it. And remember, this machine's at 192.168.100.150. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to pull up one diagram from a previous video. I want to show you one thing here. Okay, this spam diagram here, what we need to do, what's happening now, here is our actual, assume this isn't a spammer at this point right now, and this is just XP1 trying to send email. Well, when email is going to be sent out over to the internet, maybe to this machine over here, joe@aol.com, we have to send it through a SMTP server. And then in this day and age of spam, you know, let's say that we're sitting inside a hotel over here, we try to send it through an SMTP server here. Number one, they may not offer it, and number two, it's probably not going to let us send it, because then if they left an open SMTP relay out on the internet, spammers would hunt down and find this server, and they would use it to actually send spam through that machine. So what you need to do in this day and age really is for your remote users who aren't using Outlook Web Access, who aren't connecting directly to this Exchange server, you have to set up this SMTP service so they're able to send email from the external network or from out in the internet. Okay, and to do that, we have to configure this SMTP relay server to recognize that this is a legitimate user out here sending email. Because right now, when they send email to joe@aol.com, the spammer, if they're trying to relay it through our server, remember it blocks it right here. Well, now what we're going to do is go in and configure the SMTP server and say, well, I want you to block all the spam. Okay, if somebody's trying to relay off of our server, that's not going to happen. However, we do have SMTP clients now, remote clients who are traveling, and we'd like to utilize your services. Okay, and to do that, what we have to do is just enable a couple settings there, and essentially what's going to happen is we're going to force this computer here to authenticate. Prove to me that you should be able to log on and that you're a valid user within our Active Directory domain, and then I will let you relay through me and send your mail out to joe@aol.com. Okay, so that's essentially what we're configuring right now. Okay, so here we're over on SMTP1 now. You can see we have new updates. I warned you about this before. Very important. We're not going to do this right now, but it's very important that you keep this server as up to date as possible. Okay, so I'm going to connect over to Internet Information Services Manager. This is where we have our SMTP virtual server set up. And we just need to right click this default SMTP virtual server here, and we're going to click Properties. Okay, now all these settings are already in place, and it's already working for users who are within Sophie's Toy Box Company. So this virtual server is both sending and receiving email fine. We just haven't set it up for remote users yet. Okay, the first thing we need to do is go over to our Access tab, and up here where it says Access Control and Authentication, we need to check this box. By default, we only have anonymous access selected here. So what ends up happening, nobody's actually authenticating to this machine. So we need to turn on basic authentication. And this is just basically warning us that if you use basic authentication, passwords are going to be sent across the internet in clear text. Okay, and that kind of brings up a good point. In a corporate environment where you have a bigger budget and this type of setup, you very well may want to install a SSL certificate like we did earlier on the Outlook Web Access machine. And what that'll do, it'll actually allow you to set up two different, well, what you would do is set up two different SMTP virtual servers here. One would handle your remote clients, and that would require encryption. And then the second one would be just like we have right now, handling our internal mail needs, and anybody who's trying to send mail, trying to relay through us, it's going to stop them. Okay, so we're going to turn on here anonymous, basic, and integrated Windows authentication, all three of these. Click OK, and then we need to go down to relay restrictions. And remember before, we decided not to select this box. And this says basically allow all computers which successfully authenticate to relay regardless of the list above. Because as it stands right now, the only people who we're allowing to relay through this server is that Exchange server on the internal network. If anybody else tries to relay this through this server, so they try sending their email through SMTP1 and then out to some other user on the internet, that email is going to be bounced back to them. It's not going to work. So what we're going to do, check this box, and now what this is doing is saying, well, This is the only server, and we will allow some exceptions, and those are the people who can successfully authenticate. Those people, we will allow those people to also relay. Okay, and hopefully you've got your usernames and passwords in check, so the only people who are going to be relaying are your legitimate users who are just traveling, out there on the road someplace. Okay, so that's really all that we need to do here on the default SMTP virtual server, and we should be all set and ready to go. Okay, let's go ahead and close this, go back to our desktop. Now, the next step we need to worry about, let's see if we have this documented here. No, we're on the wrong one, so that would help if we came back over here. Here we are. POP3. We're still on POP3. We have nothing as far as details here. We need to go out to GoDaddy. Okay, and what we're going to do, if you want POP3 users to be able to put in a fully qualified domain name for them to actually connect to the POP3 server, the right service, we'll have to create a host name. And you can really use anything you want, but the standard is either POP or POP3. So let's go out there real quick, and we're actually going to create the one for POP3 and IMAP4 here at the same time, just so we don't have to connect out to GoDaddy again. I'm going to go ahead and stop the video here once I get to the screen so I can log on, and then once I've logged on, I'll start it right back up again. Okay, I went into the sophystoybox.com domain, as you see up here, and then I went into that same total DNS control tool that we used before, that you've seen in previous videos. So when we're looking right here, you can see already that I've set up a CNAME or an alias record as POP. And this is exactly what we did in the Outlook Web Access video here when we set up OWA Mail. I just set up POP and IMAP, and both of these are pointing to smtp.sophystoybox.com. This is the main host record that I have up here, okay, and this then will resolve down to the IP address. Okay, so now when we go into Outlook, we're going to configure pop.sophystoybox.com as our POP3 server, and then we're going to configure smtp.sophystoybox.com as our SMTP server. Okay, and we could really, all these host names, whether it's OWA Mail, POP, IMAP, SMTP, they all end up resolving down to the same IP address anyway, so it really doesn't make a huge difference which one we're using. This is just kind of give you a feel for the different host names that are typically used. Okay, so we're all set there at GoDaddy. What we're going to do now is log on to XP1, and we're going to log on as Ray Moray. And the situation is this. Ray Moray is a salesperson. He's a traveling salesperson at this point right now. He goes from hotel to hotel, and basically he needs the ability to send email using POP3. The connections aren't that great at hotels. Sometimes he doesn't have a connection at all. So what he'll typically do, dial into the network. He can't use Outlook Web Access because he doesn't have internet access in every hotel that he stays at. So what he typically does, he'll dial in wherever he can, download his email, and then after he's downloaded his email, then he'll kind of check it, compose any emails, and the next time he's going to go out or connect, he'll just connect out to the internet once again. Okay, and you'll find this sometimes in cheaper hotels where they don't have broadband connection, and you have to just dial out. And you know how expensive it can be to dial out of a hotel phone. So just a scenario there. Okay, so we're going to connect out to XP1. And we're going to log on to XP1 as Ray Moray. Okay, in this machine, as you can see up here with the IP address, it is on a different physical network. It's 192.168.1, and we're working on 192.168.200. It's literally going over the internet and coming back in to the network to get here. So this is a true representation of what would happen. Okay, now we're going to go to Outlook, but before we open up Outlook, keep in mind, because this user is not connected, let's go ahead and open it and show you. And I got this profile set up from previous. Let's disable that first. Real quick here, because we're going to come back in here in 1 second and show you what to do with that. Yeah. Okay, so we open up Outlook, and you're going to see right here, it's not able to connect out to the Exchange server. And, you know, keep in mind, you're in a hotel room right now, basically, so there's no way that you're going to connect out to the Exchange server. Now, you do have access to some of your email, but all this stuff is things that you've already looked at, and this is all locally cached at this time. And we're going to talk more about this later on in this video when we get to the offline email section. All right, so we want to download our new email, take a look at what we have, and to do that, we're going to form a POP3 connection. Now we could go in here directly and just go to email accounts and configure a POP3 account, but to make things easier and less confusing, we're going to set up a profile for Ray Moray. So we're going into Control Panel, and we're going to open up Mail. And this is a profile just like we saw in a earlier video, so we won't take a lot of time going through it, but we'll click Add here, and we're just going to put our on the road settings. Okay, so I click OK here, and it's going to prompt us to set up an email account. So this is where we'll set up our actual POP3 and SMTP settings. Okay, add a new account, POP3, and then we're going to put in his name. I'm going to pause this right now while I type all this stuff in, and we'll talk about it once I have it. Okay, so you can see our settings here. We've got Ray Moray's name filled in, rmoray@sophystoybox.com. Pop setting is pop.sophystoybox.com, smtp.sophystoybox.com, his normal username and password, okay, within Windows, and then whether you want to remember passwords, up to you, a little bit less secure. Click Test Account Settings. We see that all of these are working, so this is going out literally over the internet and testing this out, so that's good. Now one more thing you want to do, keep in mind that Ray Moray is on the road right now. He's going to be downloading his email, and what essentially is happening, you're connecting to the Exchange mailbox, and you're going to be pulling all of your email from that mailbox. Okay, and this is a personal folder that we're storing this in on the local computer. So if you download all of your email into this personal folder, when you get back into the office, it's not going to be in your Exchange mailbox. You're literally going to have to open up your personal folder, and you're going to be dealing with two different inboxes and email that's on your personal folder store. It's not in your Exchange server. Kind of a headache. Another thing, if you delete stuff, anything that you send, it's not going to be archived on your Exchange server. Also, a lot of times when people are traveling, maybe they get 20 emails, but only 2 of them are important enough to take care of right away. So just something to keep in mind. To avoid this problem, what we can do is come in here to the Advanced button and just click Leave a Copy of Messages on the Server. Okay, and this is up to you how you want to handle it. Maybe remove some server when deleted. If you know that you're only going to be out for a couple days, you can do it however you want to do it. Okay, 2 more things here. We've got this setting here, pop.sophystoybox.com. This is just a descriptive setting. To make it easier, I'm just going to call this POP3 account. And a very important setting, the outgoing server. Okay, this is the SMTP, and it does require authentication. If you forget to check this box, you're going to get an error message. It's going to keep telling you that you cannot relay email through the server because you're not authenticating. So just check this box, use the same settings as your incoming mail server, which are those Windows authentication settings. So it's literally the same username and password that you're using within Active Directory. Click OK, Next, Finish. We can close out all of our profile information here. Okay, and now when we open up Outlook, darn it, forgot to do the most important setting there at the end. Let's go back into Control Panel real quick. Okay, profiles, we need to do prompt for a profile to be used. Okay, when you do this, it's then going to prompt you for whichever profile you want. Okay, so now when I open up Outlook, it asks which profile I'd like to use. If I'm in the office, I just use Outlook. If I'm in a hotel room, I say On the Road. Okay, so now I click OK, and this is going to open up my On the Road POP3 account, totally new settings, so I'm just going to switch this around here a little bit. And if you look right now, I can click Send Receive, and this is downloading my entire mailbox at this point right now. So anything that's currently in the inbox of my mailbox is going to be downloaded and placed into this personal folder on my laptop. Okay, so just like that, you have all your POP3. Let's double check our email, make sure that we can send outbound messages. Okay, so we're on a remote network. Even messages sent to people within the company, now we're going to possibly run into problems. So we'll send 2 messages out. One's going to go to Bob Bass. We're going to have to give more than that. Okay, and the other one's going to just go to my personal email account. and we'll click send here as well. Now typically what will happen, if these are going to bounce back, they'll come back almost instantaneously. So not seeing these here so far is a good thing. We'll click send receive just to make sure. Okay, and then what I'm going to do, I'm going to pause the video here and log on with either one of those accounts. Just send a quick reply back. Okay, so the one to be more concerned about is when you're sending a message from a remote site out to somebody else, not in your home office, but in some other remote site. If you have that working correctly, it's a good bet that all the settings on your SMTP relay are set up correctly. Okay, so I'm going to pause this and I'll be right back. Okay, I did receive that on the personal account. Only took about a minute and a half or so for that to come through, if even that long. So if we click send receive right now, we'll probably download the new message that was sent back by me. Okay, and you can see right here the original was sent from Ray. Let's go ahead and open this up. Got your email, Ray, and then down here is this test to Scott that was sent just minutes ago. Okay, so everything seems to be working great here. Pretty simple to set up. It gives you a real good feel of how to set up POP3. Okay, it's onwards and upwards to IMAP 4. So we're just going to open up OneNote here again real quick and take a look at our notes. Now, IMAP 4 is going to be similar in setup, very similar in setup to what we just did with POP3. So it'll be much quicker to go through this. IMAP 4, simple to set up in the server, simple to set up in the client. Really no different than what we just did with POP3. It requires an IMAP 4 email client. Not all email clients that work with POP3 will work with IMAP 4. It's more secure than POP3. We talked about that earlier. So if you're looking for a more secure protocol, IMAP 4 is going to be your choice. Now, keep in mind you can use SSL with POP3, but out of the box, IMAP 4 is a more secure email client. Message headers. This is a big difference between POP3 and IMAP 4. In IMAP 4, message headers are actually downloaded to the local machine. So when you connect out to the IMAP 4 server, you're not downloading the full email, you're only downloading a message header. You can then look at your, let's say, 20 message headers and decide that you want to look at 2 of those message headers. When you select that email, you then download that one particular email. So the advantage of this is that you are working a lot more efficiently. Okay, you're not downloading all the email. You can get those headers pretty quickly. Also, when you're working in IMAP 4, you're actually directly working on the server itself. So if you actually delete one of those emails, you're going to be deleting it from the server as well. So it's not an offline email client like POP3 is. Okay, it's not an email protocol. So when you're using IMAP 4, you got kind of the best of both worlds. You can download that message header, you can see what the email is all about, and then you can delete it if you need to, change things around, move stuff. Anything you do in IMAP 4 is going to be saved within your mailbox on the Exchange server. Now, disadvantage, you aren't going to have complete access to all those different messages when you're offline, okay, because it's an online protocol. All right, by default, Exchange 2003 creates a default IMAP 4 virtual server. It's not started, just like with POP3, and IMAP 4 works with port 143. All right, IMAP 4 also uses SMTP to send email, so that portion is already set up for us. We don't have to reconfigure SMTP. It should work fine with our current settings. All right, let's go configure this. We're going to go back over to Exchange 1. So we'll use that same connection we had before, and we're going to run into the same problem here with IMAP 4. You see that it's disabled by default. I'll show you what I was talking about before. If I right-click and try to start it, it doesn't start up quickly like you'd expect. All right, so this can throw people, and you're wondering why it doesn't work, and maybe you need to put a service pack on there. Well, no, it's the master service that's currently disabled. So we're going to have to just minimize this. Right-click My Computer, go to Manage, and we're just going to go into the Services location. Okay, here we're looking for Microsoft Exchange IMAP 4, which is right here. And then we're going to go into the properties of this. Okay, and this actually was disabled. I think what happened here was I had started this before and did not turn it off. Okay, so this is typically disabled. You'll have to turn it on, make it automatic, and then start it, as you see right here. So kind of cheated here a little bit. All right, so if we go back here over to Exchange 1, hopefully that started up. Okay, still locked up, didn't start here. So let's see what's going on. Let's try this one more time. If this doesn't work, just to give you a feel for what I would do, I would go back into the master service and then stop and restart that. You see that it did work right now though, so no problems. Our IMAP4 service is up and running right now. Okay, if we right click this, go to properties, we see that we have very similar screen as SMTP and POP3. We're going to choose this IP address. We're actually using a physical IP address. Okay, then if we want to limit number of connections, connection timeouts, this stuff is the same thing. We do have a couple different options here. Include all public folders when a folder list is requested. You can select this in a smaller organization or where you don't have that many public folders. If bandwidth is an issue or if it's taking a long time to connect out to the server, you may want to deselect this and just not provide public folder access to your IMAP4 client users. You can also click this Enable Fast Message Retrieval. Okay, and this feature you can use just for what it says. You're going to have faster message retrieval. It downloads just an approximate size of a message. So what ends up happening here just gives you a little bit quicker. You're still going to get those same message headers, but it's not going to calculate the exact size of the message. Do be aware that some IMAP4 clients do not work with this feature turned on. So I would recommend that you leave it off just to be on the safe side. If you have complaints from your users, it's something you may want to experiment with, but for the most part, let's just leave these default settings alone. Access, same type of thing. If we go to authentication, we've got basic enabled, as well as this simple authentication and security layer, which gives us this default NTLM or NT LAN manager authentication mechanism. Just to repeat this in case you missed it last time, what this does for you, when a user like Ray Moray logs onto his machine with his Windows credentials, and then he connects out to an IMAP4 server, it's actually going to take those credentials and log him onto the IMAP4 server with those credentials in a secure, authenticated fashion. Okay, basic authentication will only fall back to this if, let's say that a user logs onto a local machine and those particular credentials are not within the Active Directory. Then we're going to have to go back to whatever's configured within the email client and use basic authentication. Okay, certificate, same thing. Connection control, we've got these same settings here. If you want to limit what IP addresses or domain names can connect to the IMAP4 virtual server, you can do that as well. Message format, we see the same settings we saw before. Calendaring, pretty much the same thing we're dealing with here, just controlling where the actual calendar is coming from when we're dealing with the Exchange server. Okay, so there's really not much to it. We're going to go ahead and click OK here, save that one change we made to the IP address, and the same thing applies before as far as the default virtual server as well. If you right click here, you can click New IMAP4 Virtual Servers. Okay, you just type in a name. It's a short little wizard here just to show you. You can use an IP address, and then we're finished right there. Same thing applies, same rule applies. When you set up a new virtual server, it has to have a different IP address port number combination. Okay, so in our case here, if we wanted a different IMAP4 virtual server, we'd have to create a new virtual IP address. Okay, that's all that we have here on this side. Let's now go over to the client side and give you a feel for what we need to do. Actually, one last thing we need to do, we need to connect to the NAT1 server and just put our service and port setting in here as well. Okay, so we just need to go down to IMAP4, enter in the Exchange server's IP address, and we're all set. Okay, so really simple, and keep in mind that SMTP has already been taken care of for us, so that's why we're not going into the SMTP settings. We have also already set up our DNS host record. We showed that in GoDaddy before. IMAP, the CNAME is pointing to the SMTP host name, and that's pointing to our one public IP address, 69. Forget it offhand right now, 69.128.98.220, I believe. Okay, back over to XP1. And just to avoid confusion, what I'm going to do here is close this. Normally you wouldn't have both POP3 and IMAP running within one client. Most likely you wouldn't. I can't think of a reason why you would. To avoid confusion, I'm going to create a different profile and just call this IMAP. Okay, and the reason is so we don't get the same email thrown into the same inbox here. Okay, so just think of this, this would be the on-the-road profile, but instead you'd be setting up an IMAP account instead of a POP3 like we did before. So I'm going to add a new email account. I'm choosing IMAP. Same information here as before, so I'm going to pause this and fill it in. Okay, and you can see we got Ray Morey, rmorey@sophystoybox.com, imap.sophystoybox.com, smtp.sophystoybox.com, and then username, password from Active Directory. Okay, you need to click on, notice there's no test, by the way. You can't test for some reason in IMAP. Click More Settings, and here we'll just switch this to IMAP so we know exactly which account it is. Outgoing server, you definitely have to check this box. It does still require SMTP authentication, that's the same. Okay, and then here, connection and advanced. Notice you don't have the same settings as we did before where we need to specify that we keep a copy on the server. That's because we're, remember, directly connecting to the Exchange server. If we delete something, we're deleting it from the Exchange server. Okay, whatever you do in IMAP is done on the Exchange server itself. Let's click OK here, and then we'll click Next and Finish. Okay, so we're all set here. We're still going to be prompted for the profile to be used, so that's good. So now when we open up Outlook for Ray, we can choose our IMAP profile and take a look at what it looks like when we're using IMAP. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and download messages now. So I'm clicking Send Receive. And Ray does not have any messages in his inbox here, so unfortunately we see nothing. Let me pause the video and throw a couple messages in there. One of those pop settings I sent before must have cleared out all the emails so we don't see anything coming through here right now. Be right back. Okay, we're back up and running here. Dumb mistake. Basically what happened, we have this personal folder down here. Well, we also have IMAP set up down here. And this is basically your IMAP setup. So we're not even working with our personal folder at this point. So I just close this, go to IMAP, and here if I look at my inbox, this is showing my complete Exchange server inbox right here. Okay, now looking through here, what you see, first off, couple new messages. I just sent 3 messages over. These 2 messages and this one opened up just by default. These right here indicate that you've just downloaded the message header. You have not actually opened this email up. So when you click on this, you'll see that this will actually disappear and you've now downloaded the full email to see locally. Okay, see the same thing happening here. If we go down below, you see that this email is shown as open. You've opened it on the Exchange server mailbox, but you haven't downloaded it here. If I click it, it's then downloading that header. Okay, so somewhat interesting. And then same thing here. If you look, it's giving you a feel. Right now this is only a 2K message, but when you look at the, it's not a good example, I'm looking for a larger attachment here, right here. Okay, this attachment is 262 kilobytes. This is not downloaded until you actually specify this and then you download the attachment itself. In POP3, you'd be downloading this entire attachment. So the disadvantage of this, if you get a giant attachment, this has happened to me before with a POP3 account, maybe somebody sends you a 5 megabyte attachment and you're not really that interested in looking at that right now, but the 100 emails that are behind it, you do need to take a look at. Well, if you're on a dial-up connection, waiting for a 5 megabyte email to come through is pretty frustrating. You know, it might take 20 minutes for that email to finally come through before you can get access to the 100 emails that are queued behind it. Okay, with IMAP, you're not dealing with that same issue. Okay, pretty straightforward, not too much different. If we send an email, you'll run into the same situation as before. We'll just send a quick one out here just to show you. Okay, so we send it out, it's going out over the SMTP server, and then it'll take just a couple minutes and that'll show up, I would assume, hopefully, in my inbox. Okay, and like I said before, if you run into a problem with a SMTP relay error, you typically get that message bounce back almost instantaneously, and that's not happened here. Okay, so we're all set here. We're going to go ahead and minimize, and we're going to move forward to our next configuration, which is going into the VPN scenarios that we see here. So this really encompasses these 3 items here: VPN server setup, the VPN client side, and just demonstrating how Outlook works over a VPN connection. Okay, let's go do it. We're going to connect out to the NAT server, which is who we need to work with first, because we're going to change that NAT server from a normal NAT server into a NAT plus VPN. Okay, so there's a couple ways you can do it. One way would be to manually configure these settings at this point right now. I don't advocate that after you've set up your firewall. You can run into some issues if you don't configure things correctly. I prefer, even though we have some settings that we're going to have to reset, basically all of these settings we're going to have to, put back in here again. Okay, I prefer to do it that way. It's pretty simple to do over trying to manually configure things. So to set this up, we need to disable routing and remote access. And what we're going to do next is just come right back in here again and give it a couple seconds. Don't try to start it up immediately. Right click again and then configure and enable. Now, if you run into internet problems after doing this, I found that the NAT server can be somewhat, or the routing and remote access server can be somewhat sensitive to stops and restarts. You may have to reboot your server to get it back up functioning correctly. Now, great new feature of Server 2003 is the wizard option to do both a VPN and NAT server in the same setting. And the reason it's great is because if you try to do one or the other, like you could do in Windows 2000, that's okay, that works okay. But when you're trying to set up the other one, trying to manually specify the VPN settings, the port filtering, packet filters that you have to set up are pretty daunting. Okay, so this takes care of all this for you, much preferred over what we had to do in Windows 2000. Okay, this is basically the same. Select the network interface that connects the server to the internet. That's going to be our WAN with the public IP address. We still want basic firewalling configured, so we'll click Next here. How do you want IP addresses to be assigned to remote clients? Well, if you have a DHCP server, you can mess around with automatic configuration. I do recommend that you kind of go through and get a feel for how this works. It can cause you problems. In our Lab 8 video, VPNs, you can get a better feel for how that works. We're just going to specify a range, make it real simple. Okay, and what we need to do is just specify, we're really just going to have one system connecting over, and you'd have to use a range that wasn't in use on your local network. So for example, we're going to use 192.168.200. It's got to match the same network ID. Make sure that that is in place. We're just going to use something like, what's not used, 205 through 208. Okay, and in all honesty, we really only need one address. You should try to set this up. Don't give out too many IP addresses. If you know that you have 3 remote users and you'll never have more than 3, then you should set this, so you're only going to have 3 down here. You can always change it at a later time, but you don't want to assign too many IP addresses. You're just opening up more security holes. Okay, so I click OK. We see that we have 4 different IP addresses possible here. I'm going to click Next. We're not going to be using a radius server for our authentication, so I'm going to click Next here on No, and then click Finish. Okay, so pretty straightforward. There's not a lot to it. You do get a warning message here. If you have multiple subnets, this will be an issue for you. We don't have that situation, so we don't need to worry about a DHCP relay agent. Okay, so the service will take just a second here to start up. Once it's started, we're going to have to go back into the same place we were at before, IP routing, NAT basic firewall, and we're going to right click WAN and then go to properties again. We're going to have to reconfigure all these services and ports. Okay, and notice we have a couple here that are turned on that we had nothing to do with. Okay, this is turned on basically to allow the VPN to function correctly, so make sure you don't mess with those, and if you do, you're going to have to just basically disable this and go through the wizard again unless you know exactly what you changed. Okay, so quickly here, IMAP 4, we'll set up, SMTP, remember this is going through the SMTP relay, so we're using 150, POP, man do we have a lot of holes in our firewall. Okay, remember, brings up a good point, if you're not using all these things, don't configure them. Okay, so you're not making your network completely vulnerable by putting all these in place, but just good security practices. If POP3 or IMAP 4 is not in use in your network, make sure that you don't have them enabled. Okay, that should be all that we need here. I think we got everything back in place just like we had it before. I'm going to click OK, and we should be all set and ready to go. Now, you may want to test this out. Let's make sure that we have internet connectivity. I'm going to go ahead and open up Internet Explorer. Okay, great. We got that back. All right, so no issues there. So we now have a VPN already set up just through that wizard. Pretty simple. We've got our internet gateway back. We've got our ports in place. Now what we have to do is go over to XP1, and from there we're going to set up our VPN client. Okay, so let's connect over. This is also pretty simple. We just go into Network Connections. We're going to go to Create a New Connection. Okay, connect to the internet, connect to my network at my workplace using dial-up or VPN. This is the option that we want, so we click Next here. We're going to set up a VPN. Okay, this is just a name so you have easy reference to it, so I'm just going to put Sophie's in here. The IP address. Now you can use a host name if you want, or you can use a actual IP address. We have all those different host names. Any of them will actually work. So for example, I could use smtp.sophiestoybox.com. Don't forget that a host name is only just a name that resolves down to an IP address. And we've got 4 different ones we configure. They all resolve down to the same IP address. Now, this is not the case in most companies. In a lot of companies, you have a bigger organization, and they have completely different public IP addresses for web servers or FTP servers or their mail servers. So don't confuse what I'm saying with reality. In our situation, in a small to medium-sized company where you have very few public IP addresses, this may be the reality where you can use any old host address to get down to the same public IP address. Okay, so we're going to use that here, or we could just enter in the public IP address. Either will work. Who's this for? My use only, I guess, and we'll just go to Finish. Okay, now there is one setting that we have to make sure that we configure, and this is basically so you have the ability to both connect to the internet and connect to your network at the same time. Okay, and this is a common question that we get here a lot. When you connect your VPN, that works great. You can connect out to the VPN, but then all of a sudden your internet doesn't work. Okay, or vice versa. If you connect out to the internet, then your VPN's not working correctly. Okay, well, this setting that we see within here will work at least on smaller networks, single subnet networks. You need to go into your properties. Then we're going to go into networking. Unfortunately, we're logged on here with a non-administrator account. So we need to go and let's see if we can actually just see it though. Properties, advanced. It's this setting right here. Use default gateway on remote network. Okay, so you want to uncheck this box. Okay, click OK. Click OK again. Click OK one more time. All right, it let us do it. Okay, this will basically allow us to connect into our network and also connect out to the internet at the same time. Okay, Ray Moray, we can just log on here with our normal credentials. If I remember them. If I can type them. Okay. If you want to save it, you can save it. It's up to you. Click Connect. Okay, and one big key thing we didn't do. Within Active Directory, we have to give Ray Moray permissions to actually dial in with that VPN. So this isn't going to work until we go back and adjust his user account. Let's go set that up real quick here. Okay, so we're going back over to our domain controller, which also exists on Exchange One. We have to go into Active Directory Users and Computers. Okay, and then we're going to go into Ray Moray's account. By default, everybody in the Active Directory does not have permissions. Nobody has permissions to dial in. So what you need to do is go to your Dial In tab and then right here click Allow Access. Okay, Allow Access. Now we can go down, click OK, and Ray should be able to connect in. So let's go back over to XP1 again, and here's our VPN session down here. Okay, just going to have to type that password out again. I'm going to save it. Okay, and when you see this, that's usually a good sign. Now you see that we have a VPN connection down here. If you want more information about it, you can look. You get information about the packets that are transmitted and then how long you've been connected. All right, very cool. Now what we can do, now that we have an actual connection, a virtual private network connection, we can open up Outlook, and we're not going to mess around with IMAP or our POP settings right now because we've got a fast connection. Maybe you got some this hotel you went to, you've got a broadband connection, so you've got super fast speed. Maybe they got a T1 there out to the internet. So you form a VPN connection and you open up Outlook directly. Outlook connected to the Exchange server directly. What's going to happen now, you literally are connected to the Exchange server. So anything you do here, is going to be directly done on the mailbox itself. You're also going to get any new email because you're currently online. So as long as you're connected, through this VPN, you've got a connection to the Exchange server just as if you were in the local office. Okay? The only thing that's going to be lacking If the VPN connection is slow, which is going to be dictated by the internet connection, well, then you might run into problems where you have performance issues. So you've got to be a little bit careful and monitor this, get some feedback from your users. VPNs are great, but one of the key components to whether or not a VPN plus Outlook is going to work is how well the performance is. If your users try to go from the inbox to the deleted items folder and Outlook freezes up, that happens enough times, it's going to cause problems. Okay, so you've got to analyze this, analyze the performance, and decide which one of these remote solutions are going to work best for you. Okay, next we're going to cover one of my favorite features in Exchange 2003 and Outlook 2003. And to get the most out of this, you will require Exchange 2003 and Outlook 2003, and that's the offline folders feature. Okay, now this is not something that's completely new in Exchange 2003. It's just greatly enhanced with how it works and then the purpose of how it's used. Now keep in mind, when we first set up a mailbox, let's say we logged on here for the first time, we opened up Outlook, one of the options you have when you specify the server and your username is to use cached Exchange mode. Okay, this is very similar to how offline folders works with a couple additional settings. Let me give you a feel. Right now we are logged on XP1 as Ray Moray, so let's log back on over there again. And we've got a VPN connection that we formed before. I think this is still connected. Yes, it is. Okay, so we're connected live to the Train Signal network. Ray is currently in a off-site location. If he opens up his email, what happens right now, he's going to choose this just connected to Exchange profile. You see here down below that we've got a status bar that says connected. If we right-click this, we also have a choice of work offline. Okay, and what happens by default when you select that use cached Exchange mode, which is the default, all the files, emails, calendars, all the information, the majority of the information anyway, within your Outlook mailbox is going to be cached locally on your hard drive. Now the benefit of that is when you're not connected to the Exchange server, you still have all this information available to you. Okay, let me give you an example right now. Now I'm going to disconnect the VPN connection here. Okay, and this is going to effectively cut us off from the Sophie's network. Okay, you see right here, this changes to trying to connect. So it goes through this process for a period of time before it eventually goes into this disconnected mode. It gives you a time the folder was last updated, and then if you look up here, traditionally if you don't have offline folders enabled, you wouldn't be able to, go back and forth between your calendar, your inbox. You just wouldn't be able to see any of this information here. Okay? With offline folders, this cached Exchange mode, we can see all this information. What we won't have the ability to send out new email, get our new email, but I can do things like, work offline. I can actually send a reply out to this person here. So I'm just going to send a quick reply. I click send, and what it's going to do at this point right now, it's going to sit in my outbox until I'm ready to connect to the Exchange server again. Okay, so there's a couple ways this works. The first way is you can kind of control when you connect out to the Exchange server or not. So for example, now when I'm in the office, of course, I'll be connected to the Exchange server. When I leave the office, maybe I'm working from home and I don't feel like forming a VPN connection. It's kind of a pain. It slows things down. So I have access to all of my email on my laptop. I can check my inbox. I can go through. I can compose messages. I may have 40, 50 messages in here. I could compose 10, 15 different messages out to people, and they're just going to be queued in my outbox. I can add items to my calendar. I can do all sorts of stuff. I can move items around. Then when I'm ready to connect, okay, so I'm in a remote location, my home or a hotel or something, then I just go and I form that VPN connection again. Oops, wrong one. Okay, and I connect back out to the network, and now within Outlook, you see that now it shows up as connected. Okay, so this is now going to sync up, and you'll see that this email is now going to be sent here in a second. Okay, so we haven't synced up yet, but if I click send receive, it'll go ahead and send that email out. So this is a great feature in Outlook 2003. It makes it just a heck of a lot easier to work. You can work offline even when you're in the office if you choose to as well. Okay, and the advantage of doing that in a network situation, maybe you have intermittent network connections. You've got I don't want to say faulty network equipment necessarily, but just a really, really busy network. But what will happen, your Outlook is going to respond and still work great because all this information is still cached locally. So right now when I'm looking at this email, even though I'm connected out to the Exchange server now, I'm not going to go out to the Exchange server and pull this information down. I'm actually accessing this off of a locally cached email. Okay? When I open it up and I actually do something that needs to be changed, at that point we'll connect out to the Exchange mailbox and then use network bandwidth up. Okay, so you can just go ahead and work as normal. You don't even have to pay attention to this. If it shows up disconnected down here for 5-10 seconds or so, you really don't have to worry about it because you can still access your email, and when it connects back online again, you'll be able to send that email out automatically. So it's a really cool feature. If you want to work offline for whatever reason, you can right click like we said before and click work offline, and you're going to see that it shows up like this. Okay, it does give you an update of the last time you've updated this folder. And then once again, if we were sending an email out, nothing's going to go through at this point right now. So I click send here, okay, and you see that it's just going to stick in the outbox even when I click send receive. Okay, well, in this case, what ended up happening is because we marked it offline and we have an actual connection formed, it went ahead and connected to the Exchange server, sent that email out, and then put us right back offline again. Okay, if you literally were disconnected where the cable was pulled or you just weren't connected like before when our VPN connection was disconnected, in this case it's going to show up disconnected, and when you try to send an email out, just like I did a second ago, it's not going to make it through. There's nowhere to actually send it through. Okay, so now it is in the outbox. When I click send receive, it's trying to connect and it's just going to be stuck right there. Okay, so pretty cool feature. Not a lot to do as far as configuration is concerned either. Okay, let's go ahead and look at some of the configurations we can change. We're going to go into email accounts here, and the first thing we'll look at, okay, just change, more settings, and then right here on the general tab, you have some choices right here. Okay, when starting, do you want to automatically detect connection states? So that's what it does here. It determines whether or not we're connected out to a fast network or not, and fast is determined as anything over 128 kilobytes per second. We can manually control connection state, and right here if you check this box, you actually get to choose, okay, whether or not you've got a fast connection or a slow connection. Okay, so you can make that determination right there. Or you can use the default connection state, connect with the network or work offline, whichever you choose. Okay, we're going to leave it on automatic, which makes the most sense to me. Let the Exchange or the Outlook client make the decision there. Now, if you run into problems where you find that this isn't working so hot, you can go ahead and manually control this, and just a way for you to have more control over your Outlook client. If you go to advanced, you see here's where we can toggle on used cached exchange mode. If you don't want to use it, you can select this box and turn it off. Here we have offline folder file settings. This has already been set up, so we don't have any control over the encryption. You can see right here that when you originally set up the Outlook file, you can set it up with no encryption, compressible encryption, or high encryption, and that won't be able to be compressed when you have high encryption. You can control the location of this file. It's on the C drive by default, but since this has already been set up and we did this when we initially set up this account, we don't have any control over this right now. Okay, if you wanted to, you could take this off, basically delete your offline folder, redo this, and when you reset up this email account at that point, you could specify exactly where you want this cached folder to be. And it does make a lot of sense because let's say you've got a laptop, you've got a 60 gigabyte hard drive in your laptop, you're probably going to partition that laptop up where you've got maybe a 20 gigabyte system partition and a 40 gigabyte D partition where you store all of your data. The preference is to put that offline folder store onto the D drive that has more space and also is going to be not worked as much. Okay, so put it on the D drive there. You also want to make sure your hard drive doesn't get overly full, and this is pretty much true with anything. If you have a 40 gigabyte partition, you don't want it to get up in the 35 to 40 gigabyte range, or your whole computer is really not going to perform well, but especially these offline folders. You've got a giant limit as far as the number or the size of this folder. You can actually, if you're running Outlook 2003, you can get this folder up to 20 gigabytes. Okay, you can actually cache up to 20 gigabytes of information there. Now, you do run into performance issues, and I've read a couple articles. When you get up to 1 gigabyte, you typically start taking a hit. So even though you have all that space to play with, it's recommended that you keep that file in control, in check, and as small as possible. Okay, well, how do we do that? How do we control that setting? Well, real simple. Let's go take a look here. Let's go ahead and cancel out here, and then go take a look. Let's look at our inbox. Okay, or deleted items is a good one. Your inbox, if you're anything like me, you try to keep your inbox somewhat cleaned out. So, if it's a good day or a good week, by the end of the week, you've got nothing in your inbox or very few emails in your inbox. I then move my emails over to saved folders, or I delete items. So if an item appears in deleted items, what I do is I leave it in there for a certain period of time, and it's kind of like my safety valve. If I delete an email message and somebody gets back to me and it's referring to something I deleted, I can check back in there, and I typically keep them for, let's say, 2 months back. Okay, so let's say that that's the amount of time I want to keep deleted items for, is for 2 months. I can right click here, go down to properties. Okay, now in the synchronization tab, I can filter exactly how much I want to save. Okay, so I've got all sorts of stuff as far as when I say save, how much information we're going to keep in that offline folder. Okay, so we can filter based upon who it's from, who it's sent to, words. I think your best bet is go to the advanced tab, and then what we're going to do is look for date time fields, okay, and then received. Probably makes the most sense to me. Okay, condition, I would say on or before, anytime. Okay, and then basically what you need to do is fill out these conditions based upon what we want to do. Okay, this isn't exactly what I was specifying before, but let's see, let's try this again. Modified, received, come back here again, condition, on or before, exists, does not exist, and then you have to put in a value here. Okay, so we could say on or before and then put in a particular date, and then once we have that, click OK. Okay, the point is to work with these filters, get it set up to the point where you're going to filter out all the excess stuff that you're no longer going to need. Okay, and that's what this filtered synchronization is for. If you want to get more and by the way, you can do this on each of your different folders here. So if you go to properties and then synchronization, okay, that's what this filter button is for on each one of these. You can do that on each one of these different buttons here. If you go to actions and then go down to tools, send receive, and then go down to send receive settings, then go into define send receive groups. Okay, and then within here we have just one send receive group called all accounts. Okay, and then down below you see we've got information about when Outlook is offline. Okay, what do you want to do? Well, we can go in here and edit this. We can control exactly which folders are going to send receive when we're offline. You can come in here and control whether or not you want to download headers or the complete item including attachments. So there's all sorts of stuff you can do to control your actual offline folder settings. One more thing that you need to be aware of with offline folders is the address book, okay? The offline address book. If you go here, you see that we have a download address book. You may want to specify this at least originally so you get a up-to-date address book. When we're offline right now, for example, keep in mind we don't have access to the Exchange server. So when I want to actually use the address book, and this isn't going to work because we're not connected, but I already have an address book that I had downloaded previously. So when I click New and then go to I have this complete global address list from Sophie's Toy Box Company. So I can pick out any of these users here and actually use this global address list to conduct email. Now think about that. I mean, this is all offline because we don't have access to the Exchange server and there's no way we could pull this information. Okay, so that's another consideration when you're using offline folders. Make sure that you have a downloaded address book, and by default you're going to get that when you first connect and set up in cached Exchange mode. Okay, so real cool feature. Take a look at that. It works by default. I do recommend that you play around with it a little bit. It's really one of those things that you need to use and modify based upon your own personal preferences. Okay, so there's not a lot as far as technicality with it. You just need to go in and make it work how you want it to work for you. All right, our last topic is Outlook Mobile Access. This is a new feature in Exchange 2003. Real simple to set up and configure. And just going back here to our diagram, what it's designed to do is to give PDAs basically Pocket PC devices, the ability to actually log into an Exchange server, check email, do just about anything that a normal remote client would be able to do, provided you have wireless access, of course. You'd have to have wireless access here to connect out to the internet. Okay, so we're going to take a look at how to set this up. It's real basic on how to set it up. I will tell you, you do run into issues with it, especially when we have a situation like we have here where we have Exchange and the domain controller on the same machine, as well as SSL on that machine. Okay, we've done a lot of testing with it internally here, and I found that it's quite flaky, and sometimes it works okay, and sometimes it doesn't work so okay. So we're going to go enable it here, try our best with it, and give you a feel for how it works and then some of the downsides to it. Okay, we need to connect over to Exchange 1. So we're going to do that, and we're going to go inside System Manager. And this tool is real simple. We just go in Global Settings here. You see Mobile Services, and you just right-click it, go to Properties, and the only thing that we have to do here is click Enable, and then Enable Unsupported Devices, just so you get as many devices supported working with Outlook Mobile Access as possible. That's it. There's nothing else on this tab. You can go to Details here, but there's nothing to configure. Okay, so we just click OK, and that's all there is to it. Now, on the client side, what typically should happen is we should be able to open up a browser, and we just have to supply the NetBIOS or the fully qualified domain name. Come on. Okay, like you see here, Exchange, and we're just going to go down here. You supply OMA, Outlook Mobile Access. Okay, and what this is going to do is take you to the server, and then after that it's going to take you to the OMA service. Okay, then it asks for a username and a password, so we're going to log on here as, let's use Ray Moray since we've been using him throughout today. So enter in his username and password, click OK, and notice it doesn't like that. That's because in this particular case it wants us to supply a domain name. So we're going to have to type in Sophie's Toy Box. Okay, and then put in our password once again. Okay, now this is what comes up quite a bit in our current situation. A system error has occurred while processing a request, and we're not able to actually access this. In thorough testing with this in this type of environment, and keep in mind, we have all of the latest operating system, hot fixes, service packs in place. We've done research on this through Microsoft's website and other Exchange blogs, things along those lines. And the only solution to this problem, they tell you, is to basically take SSL off of the system. Okay, is one solution. It works better if you split up your Active Directory and your Exchange server. So that's okay, and as we talked about before, you really shouldn't have Exchange and Active Directory on the same system anyway. So that'll help. And there is one fix. It's a lengthy fix that involves a virtual directory setting and a registry entry. So we're not going to cover that here. What we're going to show you, just to give you a feel for how this works, is how we can make it at least work momentarily. Okay, and this isn't our preferred way of making it work, but we'll at least get it set up so you can get a feel for what it looks like, and then from there, just give you some other advice. What we're going to do is go in here to our Exchange Virtual Directory, and its Exchange Virtual Directory is the one that Outlook Web Access accesses. So I go to the Directory Security tab, and what I'm going to do is turn off SSL. Okay, we still have the certificate installed, but by deselecting those boxes, we're turning off the requirement to use SSL for Outlook Web Access. So not really something that I want to do. Now, if I go back over to the client at this point, in experimenting with this, what we found is we've typically had luck now connecting over to it. So I'm going to go ahead and go out to Exchange 1 again, and then OMA. Ray Moray, and then a password. Okay, and this is what comes up. Now this is a simulation. Keep in mind we're on a computer right here. We're not on a, some sort of PDA Pocket PC device. So imagine looking into a PDA, and this is what you'd have here. Okay, so you see your inbox, and if we open this up, you see all the messages. This is how they would appear on the actual PDA. You can open up any of these messages if you want to take a look at one of these particular messages is all about. Didn't type anything in there, so not too exciting. Let's go down to this one here, this attachment. Okay, you see here that it just gives you some general information, but you can do anything you can do in a normal standard email, anything that's, I guess, provided within a PDA. You can reply to the message. You know, right here we could just click the required information once we've actually typed the message out. Okay, then we just have to click OK, and then we have send. Okay, so you see that it fills in the information for you. Obviously not as efficient as a normal Outlook client, but that's because you're working in a little, 3-inch screen. Okay, so this is how it works, and we can also use it on the internet as well, and that's of course where we'd want to be using it. We wouldn't use it if we were inside the office. So over on XP1, keep in mind we have no VPN connection established right now, and we can connect to the internet, and we just need to use one of those host names that we used before. So we will, and we're just going to use what are we going to use? smtp.sophiestoybox.com/OWA. Okay, and this should connect through the actual Exchange server, through the firewall. We should have the ports in place for this to work. So we'll give it a second, see if it's actually going to work for us. Let's close our browser. Let's try it one more time and see if we can't get it to work. Use a different host name. Shouldn't really matter, like I said before, though. Okay, let's see here. Let's try and troubleshoot on the fly while we're thinking about this. What might be causing our problem? We're using port 80, so that shouldn't be an issue. This is going to direct us right to the Exchange server. Let's see if... Never really checked our mailbox before to see if that was actually working. I get this sneaky feeling like port 80 isn't configured on that NAT server, okay? Because this should be working right now and going through, and we've had no problems with that whatsoever. So let's just take a quick look just to make sure here, and we'll troubleshoot from there. Okay, services and ports. Yep, we never enabled that, so that will definitely cause the problem. Okay, 192.168.200.100 looks good. And let's test this out one more time here and see if we can't get it. Okay, so back in XP1. Just going to type this out again to make sure we have it correct. Okay, smtp.sophiestoybox.com OWA. Oops, OMA. Man, oh man. There we go. Okay, so now we can log on, and we're just going to supply those same credentials. Okay, and you see the same view. So from here, out on the internet, you can connect this way. So it's not much different. This is just a simulation. You could use this if you really wanted to provide this as remote access to your, clients out there. They could use this from a computer, but of course it wouldn't make much sense when you have the full-blown Outlook web access to use. Okay, one last thing you can do, I'll show you, make your life a little bit easier on this OMA setup, is to provide the actual domain for people. To me, that's a real pain in the butt to have to type out Sophie's Toy Box. So what we do here is just go over to directory security where it says authentication and access control, and down here under default domain, just type out your domain, or you can click select and choose it from the list here. Okay, so it's now going to supply this domain. So now when my users, we'll go over to XP1 again, now when my users are logging on, let's close it so we get a true simulation. They won't have to put in the domain name. Okay, you're going to see that right here. Okay, I can just type in Ray Moray and the password. Okay, so just a quick heads up there. You can use that in different situations as well to work with any of your different environments. Okay, so that gives you a real good feel on how Outlook Mobile Access works. Simple to configure, it really is. There's nothing more to it than that. We can put in place SSL with it, database encryption, so we'd just be using HTTPS in this situation. Work needs to be done, though, on Microsoft's part to get this solution working without having to break down our Outlook web access server like I just showed you a second ago. Okay, that wraps up video 7 on accessing email remotely. Hope you found this video informative. We'll see you back here real soon when we do video 8.